Passover starts a week from Saturday night.
Yeah.
And part of the soon is that it's in March. Part of the soon is that there's still a little snow on the ground. But so what I wanted to do today was something a little bit different. I wanted to look at the order of the Seder and use it as a spiritual tool of how to reflect on our past year in the pandemic. Because for me, and I suspect many of you, it feels hard that this is the second Seder that we're having under COVID restrictions. So even though probably a lot of people on this call have been vaccinated and have a little more freedom than maybe a couple months ago, we're still in the pandemic and we still can't have the Seders that we used to have. And the Seder represents the first holiday that we're, the first one that's a second holiday. I don't know how to say that, but you know, Purim was in person in 2020 and Pesach wasn't. So we're starting the second year. So I want to spend a brief time to just go over the traditional order of the Seder and then look at what, oh, look, see, as soon as I start talking, more people start coming. It's great. Yeah. Hi, Marcy. Hi, Dad. That's my dad. Oh, who's showing his face? Before
hey, there he is.
And hi, Marcy. That's fun. I'm glad you're here, Marcy, because this morning I thought, oh, I didn't send a reminder. So I'm glad that you found it anyways.
Yeah, no, glad to be here. Nice to see everyone.
Good to see you.
So and how I think about this is there's a way to think about the holiday cycle as a whole and each holiday in particular as meeting our spiritual needs. So if we think about you know, the holidays have their historical meaning and the way we celebrate them, but also what needs are they meeting for us as individuals and as a people. So for example, we have a holiday of Yom Kippur where we atone for our sins. We have a holiday of Purim where we sort of let loose and celebrate. So we can think of them as maybe what is our spiritual need of humor, of forgiveness, you know. So Pesach, Passover, is a holiday that speaks to a number of different spiritual needs. One is, the main one is liberation and being liberated from what we're enslaved in. But I also think there's two sort of smaller ones. One is the Seder itself Seder means order, and that there's often in a time of crisis or distress, a real intense need for order. And I think that that's true of the slaves being freed, right? Like that was a very chaotic time. That might have been a positive thing, but it was chaotic and disorderly. And we know that, like, sometimes even when good things happen in our lives, when we have a new baby, that might be great, but everything is, you know, thrown into disorder in some ways, and we want to try and find order. When somebody dies, things feel like we don't have control. So religion also often gives us that order, and I think Passover particularly has that. And then the other thing that Passover, I think, does as a sort of spiritual gift is storytelling, is that we're retelling our story, we're remembering who we are, where we came from, which is an important part of spiritual practice. So I want to look at that order it creates, and this year in some ways has been a disordered year, and we've put order into it. But the beginning of the pandemic last year, if we try and think back to that, how chaotic and scary and unknown and the opposite of Seder, the opposite of order, the opposite of knowing, everything we knew how to do, we didn't have that. And so, and part of the retelling of our story is now that we've passed the year mark and we're beginning the Jewish cycle again, is sort of looking back at what this year has brought us. So I'm going to share my screen. And make it bigger. Didn't really do anything. So I just want to start so that I'm going to do this sort of quickly, the order of the Seder. So in the beginning of a traditional Passover Seder, we actually sing the Hebrew words here as a song. Each time we get to, there are 14 parts of the Seder that are listed here, and we repeat this, the actual order of the Seder. We Kadesh Orchatz Karpas Yachatz. So we actually sing the order. That's how ordered it is. We have an order, and then we sing it, and we sing it over and over again. So I just want to go over that order before I bring us to sort of the use of the order as a spiritual reflection. So Kadesh, we start with a Kiddush, a blessing of the meal. That's how we often start Jewish ritual. And then we, wait, I'm going to just close a window so that beeping stops. Okay. Then it is traditional to wash our hands before a meal. So when we have a meal with bread, we wash our hands and we say a hand washing blessing. And we start the Seder meal that way, but in a little bit of a different way. We wash our hands, but we don't say a blessing. Because there was a debate whether when we're eating the often parsley and salt water, but green vegetable and salt water, whether that requires washing. Is that a meal or we're not really in a meal? So there's washing, but washing without a blessing. Then we have the dipping of, I grew up with parsley, but other people use other greens. It's funny, when I was getting a list of the Seder, it said onions and potatoes. And I was like, really? Do people dip potatoes in salt water? That's kind of interesting. But anyways, a spring vegetable, we dip it in salt water to remind us of the tears of slavery and the season of springtime. Then we have the part where we have 3 pieces of matzah and we divide the middle matzah. And we keep the larger of the broken parts to hide later as the afikomen. And then the part that we sort of, that's the longest, is the telling of the story. So this is where we retell the story, and we have the cups of wine, the 4 children, the 4 questions, the 4 children. I don't think I had the 4 questions there, but oh yes, the 4 questions, and then the response to the questions, the plagues, Dayenu, and we end with wine again at the end of that. So that's the main and longest part of the Seder service, and it's the retelling of the story. And then as we move towards the meal and the eating of the matzah, we now wash our hands again, but we say the blessing for hand washing because we're about to eat matzah. So we wash again, and then we say the blessing for eating matzah, and we both say the hamotzi, the normal blessing we say when we eat bread, and then also a special matzah blessing. And then we go from matzah to maror, to the bitter herbs, to this interesting part, which I'm excited to connect to pandemic times, is the Hillel sandwich, korech. Now, the Hillel sandwiches comes from that the 3 symbolic foods on the Seder plate used to be eaten together. So the lamb, the matzah, and the bitter herbs. We don't eat the lamb anymore. And so it's matzah, bitter herbs, and some charoset. So the sweetness of the herbs, the sweetness of the charoset, the bitter herbs, and the matzah together. And here, there's no blessing said because we just said the blessing over the matzah. So we eat this Hillel sandwich without a particular blessing and without a particular, there's nothing sort of particular about that moment. It's sort of the appetizer to the meal. But I think really important to think about that. And then we enjoy the meal. Sometimes started with an egg as a symbolic food of spring. And then when the meal's over and there's dessert, then there's the looking for the afikomen, the broken piece of matzah. And then we end with the 4th cup of wine and the blessing, the grace after meals, which is essentially the same as on any day, just with some added. Then we sing Hallel, which is praise, songs of praise, said on the holidays to thank God for the freedom and for the joy of this holiday. And then we end, and the traditional ending of the Seder is next year in Jerusalem. Okay, so before I go on to what I want to do to use that order, does that order feel familiar? Are there questions about this? You know, anything, any details about this that anyone has questions on? And how am I going to see it?
I have a question that may be way too specific.
That's okay.
It's not really about the order, but one thing I've never learned, and I'm curious if you can explain, Rabbi, is why is it that we break the middle matzah? There must be a significance that it's the middle matzah.
Yeah, why the middle? I feel like I used to know that and I don't remember, but I should find out. Why the middle matzah? Does anyone know why the middle?
Because there are three matzot right on the plate.
Yeah.
And I've read that they represent the Kohanim, the Leviim, and the Israelite, and the rest of the people.
Oh, but also I wonder if there's something about it being hidden in the middle. I don't know.
Oh, maybe that's it. Yeah.
That's what rings a bell, but I feel like I used to know, but I don't remember.
Okay, well, I can search it out too.
And you tell me if you find before I do.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, I'm not going to look right now, but
No.
So some people look and talk, and I can barely look at you and the two screens. Okay, so this probably feels pretty familiar to people, but I wanted to use that familiar order and this idea of both the spiritual act of remembering and of creating order, which I think our tradition does quite well in both ways, and I think Passover does well in particular. And I want to say something about order before we go to the next part. You know, order, some people think that freedom is a world sort of without order, that everything is free, but sometimes freedom is best accomplished when there's order, right? So the Israelites leave and, you know, are in this chaotic wandering in the desert time. And then when they get to Mount Sinai, they're given a whole set of laws and order around how to become a community. And so freedom doesn't mean that they have no constraints. Freedom means that they can be with each other as a people and that they have choices, but they're now dedicated to something better. But it doesn't mean that there's no order or constraints. And I think that that's sort of important. Okay, so we'll see how this works. This is a little bit experimental to me, but it was fun. So I'm hoping you'll enjoy it and then join me. So my idea is to share with you how I thought of it and then hopefully invite you to share how you might see it and where you are in this moment and maybe how that's related to Passover. So I was thinking, so if we think of the Seder and we map our year onto the Seder and we think about where are we now, where were we a year ago, and where are we going, I mapped that onto the Seder order. So here we go. So the hardest one was the first one. So Kadesh is the beginning of the meal, but really it's the blessing over the wine. And I thought, gosh, last March 13th or 15th, around then, I'm not sure I was feeling a whole lot of blessing, or I would know what blessing to say, besides like that I was glad I had a home and that I'm glad that I liked the people I lived with. But the beginning didn't necessarily feel like a blessing moment. It felt really scary and chaotic. But we had the beginning, and we can probably all remember that around last year at this time when we kind of realized we were in the beginning of something big, even though we had no idea how big it was. From having been at Purim and sort of washing our hands more to then like school being canceled and everything being canceled. And then we get to Or Chatz. And of course, hand washing has been a very key part of our year. But if we think of the beginning of the pandemic and the beginning of the washing, we didn't really know. We didn't have a structure the way we have normally when we wash our hands before a meal. We know how to wash them, and we have a blessing. When we began washing our hands in the beginning of the pandemic, we were scared. We would wipe everything we touched. I remember I used to go to the store and think I would like wipe my credit card, and then I would think, oh my gosh, did I wipe it before I put it back in? And everything had to be wiped, and everything was scary, touching anything. And we didn't quite know how the virus was spread. I mean, if we remember, we weren't wearing masks, but we were wiping everything at that point. And so I think of that as like the washing without a blessing, the washing without a container, right? We were doing these things, but we didn't really know how to do it or what to do. And then Karpas feels pretty easy to connect to, of the springtime and the tears that came with the springtime, both as we watched, luckily not here as much, but as we watched what was happening in New York, and as we watched as people couldn't get the help they needed, and as we began to weep tears of the things we were starting to miss, the people we knew that we couldn't see, the seders we couldn't attend, the seders we couldn't fly to, all the things we had to cancel. So there were a lot of tears, symbolic or otherwise, a lot of sadness in the spring, I think, along with the fear. And then the yachatz, the dividing of the middle matzah. Now I want to know why the middle, but the dividing of the matzah, I think of as we moved into the summer, there was a lot of division. There was the division over mask wearing in the country, and in our state was right at the forefront of that, of mask mandates that were struck down, people not wearing masks. I remember going in the summer to a cabin with my family only a couple hours from here, and there was a Governor Evers, I'm sure we've all had this experience, but Governor Evers' mask mandate was in place, but the sign on this, I just stopped at the gas station and was going inside the little store, and it said, according to Governor Evers' mandate, you have to wear a mask. It's something like, so you probably should, or something. And I walked in and no one was wearing a mask, and the people working there had their masks on their chin. And I think I walked straight out, but it was just sort of this like division around masks, and I must be a Madison person because I'm wearing a mask or something. I don't know. And then there was the division happening around racial justice, right? I mean, it seems like a long time ago now, but it was only June, the George Floyd and all the protests that came with that. And I think in a lot of ways last summer really revealed the divisions that existed in our communities, in our state, and in our country, both from the protests and the masks, but also the haves and have-nots, the people who had healthcare, who had ways to social distance, and those who didn't. So, and then if we move on to Magid, we think of the quarantine as dragging on. I think many of us thought, oh, in March, we thought, oh, by summer it'll be over. And as we moved on, it felt long, just like the Seder maybe sometimes feels really long, like when's the meal coming? Well, when are we gonna get there? Are we done yet? And we began to tell stories. We had a little bit of time, so we began to tell stories of how our lives had changed. And we began to ask questions. We began to sort of ask questions both about systems in our country, and also ask questions about how our government was acting, how we should act. And then also, I was gonna say something else. Yeah. Oh, and the 4 children. We started noticing maybe people in our lives who were acting like the 4 children, the wicked, the wise, the simple, and that person who's unable to ask. So the sort of people who thwarted the rules, or maybe who just got really difficult because of the pandemic. And then there was the ones who were like, okay, life is simple now. And so we see the 4 children too, as we lived through this. And then we get to Rachsa, the washing with the blessing. So now we do the proper washing with the proper blessing. And I think of this as like, we got to a new normal where we had our new routines. We had a lot more knowledge of how to keep safe, I don't know what, there was a new normal, and we knew kind of what we were doing, and we might not have liked it, but we knew more how to keep safe and why we were washing our hands and why we were doing what we were doing. And maybe we didn't need to wash every piece of everything that came in the house. And so we sort of had a container for some of that anxiety, just like we do when we wash our hands before a meal. And then there's eating of the matzah. And I feel like matzah is like such a good symbol for the pandemic, because both there was this sort of boring taste of the matzah and how we crave the things that we don't have, and that happen, that happens when we're eating matzah all week, but it also happened in the pandemic. But sort of more than that, one of the cool things, if we think about chametz, of the laws around getting rid of the leavening in our house, or the leavened stuff, is that you're actually not even supposed to own chametz. So this thing that all year is permitted becomes so forbidden that you can't even own it. So it's not like ham that's forbidden all the time. It's something that is okay, and then becomes forbidden to the point where you can't even own it. You're supposed to sell or get rid of all your chametz. So I think what that selling does, a few things. One is, when something that's normalized becomes forbidden, it makes us question even the most basic part of our life, of what we eat, right? So for a week, it sort of we question everything, including what we eat, and we notice it, and it sort of turns it upside down. And like, of course, that's what the pandemic did, right? The most basic parts of our life became upended and questioned and turned around. And also that the taking of the chametz out of our house and the eating of the matzah reminds us that we're actors in our own liberation, that we don't just get taken out of Egypt on a magic carpet. We had to walk out of Egypt. We had to take that first step into the Red Sea and trust that we would get somewhere. And that's true every year when we clean our house, right? And take the bread out of our house, we're having to do something. We're having to, or undo something. We don't just get to like have liberation with no effort, and that we're actors in that. And I think that for a lot of us this year, we had to do more. We had to sort of like recreate our lives and our daily structures so that we could find ways of coping, and also I think do more stuff, for ourselves in certain ways that we may be dependent on other people. My kids are now home all the time. I don't outsource them to school every day, or the person who used to come and do handyman stuff in the house, I've just had to figure some of that out or let it go. So that kind of doing stuff on your own and being an active part in shaping our lives, I think, is part of matzah. And then I think of Maror as that time in the fall, the really scary time again in the fall and the winter, when the numbers were so high, especially here. That's really when it was really hard here, when COVID was everywhere, when it was getting dark, when the days were short and COVID, and we really couldn't go anywhere. And there was so much death happening in the country. And there was a lot of sadness. There was fear. And I think there was bitterness from a lot of people around why our country had gotten to that point again with such poor leadership. I guess that's an opinion, but we hadn't taken care of the pandemic, and we were at this place in the beginning of the winter. And then I would argue that where I think maybe communally we are right now might be at Korach. We're sort of between the bitterness and between the celebration. So we both are tasting the bitterness of the maror in our Hillel sandwich and the sweetness of the choroset. And we have the sweetness of the vaccine, of the lowering of the numbers, of the beginning of opening things up, but we're not quite there yet. And we're not, I know I've felt like this maybe in the last week. I felt a little less like this, but a little tentative, like, really, is this really, are we really at the end of are we really seeing the light? Is the light really there? And not quite sure knowing, and not So we're not ready to say a blessing for the end, but we have a little bit of sweetness in our sandwich with our bitterness that we're still holding, but we're not quite there at the full meal. And I want to say something, because this is when we eat charoset, is that many things on the Seder table have a double meaning, including the charoset. So in the Hillel sandwich, the charoset is sweetening the bitter herbs, but the charoset also is a symbol of the bricks that the slaves used to, the mortar for making, doing the work of slaves. So it's both sweetness and a reminder of slavery, all in one taste. And we can see the matzah that way too. The matzah is both the bread of slavery, the bland bread, but it's also the bread of affliction, right? Because it's the blood of slavery. We call it the blood of affliction, but it's also that food that they brought as they moved into slavery. So it's sort of the bread of slavery and the bread of freedom and the bread of slavery, depending on what moment we're eating it. And so I think that's also been an experience during COVID of, there's sort of sweet things that come out and you're like, wait, but I'm supposed to hate the pandemic, but I really like that I get to work from home, or that I don't know, get to have more space in my life. And then there's other moments where all those things feel really, really hard and you just feel mad at them. So I think that sort of double meaning of things, the Seder's telling us, like, everything's not black and white. It's the bread of affliction and the bread of freedom all at the same time. So I'm hoping that where we're at now is that we're about to get to the meal, where we get to celebrate and eat together. And there's not much more to say about that. And I think that when we think of safun, of the dessert, as this time has passed, I think we've all found small blessings and gifts from the pandemic that maybe we didn't expect and we wouldn't have wanted to come this way. But I think that it's sort of important to reflect on those also as we move past this year. And then there's the grace after meal, the blessing after the meal. And I think that some of us, especially those of us who are vaccinated, are starting to say blessings of grace that we survived the pandemic, because so many didn't. And I sort of imagine Hallel being the time when we get to, I don't know when we know it'll be over, but at some point we'll be able to sing Hallel together and celebrate the pandemic being over. And then as we look towards, this opening and more people being vaccinated, the question is, what's next? So we say at the end of the Seder next year in Jerusalem, but I think for a lot of people right now, there's a question of like, well, what's next? We're not going back to February 2020. So much has changed. And maybe there's things that we don't want to go back to. And maybe there's new things we've learned, but it's really confusing to know what's next. What does the world look like, and how does it change? And how does it change in this sort of middle term too, of like more things are opening up, but it's not all over. And so we're also in the Yirtzah, in the what's next phase too. So I just am looking at my notes for a second. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there, but I'd really love to hear what people think of this sort of model and any reactions to it, just your thoughts. And then I have more specific questions if everyone's.
I love your comparison. It is spot on in my opinion.
Thank you, Roz.
You go through the terror part, the happiness, I get to stay home from work, and then the terror part of it, of what's going to happen, and then the hopeful part as things get going, and to the point where you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and then the hope for the future. I don't, there's nothing more for me to say. It's really, it's home.
Thank you. Well, and the idea is also to like, how can we use the Seder and how can we use the liturgy in general? I mean, the Seder's liturgy specifically, but the liturgy and our tradition in general to sort of not just to do it in order to do it, but use it as a tool to reflect on our own lives. So I'd love to hear where people are at. Are we at these are the sort of places I thought of, if people are willing to share, you know, are we still feeling broken like the middle matzah? And I'm sure there's lots of people who are. I mean, people who've lost people or lost all sorts of things. Or are we at the edge of the Red Sea? There's a midrash about a man named Nachshon, the first person who took a step into the Red Sea, right? God says that, like, are we going to trust and walk in that Red Sea? And someone has to take the first step. So maybe we're at that first step. Maybe we're at the other side of the Red Sea singing with Miriam and just in such joy about having gotten the vaccine or having gotten to see someone for the first time. So just today, and not in like a big way, but I would love to know if anyone's willing to share where they are if they look at this model. And I want to see if I can fit it all in, but I feel like if I fit it all on one page, it'll get too small. But yeah, is anyone willing to share?
I guess I would say kind of like all at the same time. Like it's not any one thing, and at any minute, it's different pieces. It's kind of like grief, that it doesn't come in a row, like the different stages of grief. I feel like all of this is true at different times. I think that it's really nice to have this, put together in this way, because, just in terms of order, like another Passover marks a year of the pandemic. And even just thinking, where were we last time at this exact year? It provides order in that really broad sort of way. And so I think that, some people are vaccinated, some aren't, some have gotten a little sick, some a lot sick, some, like it's all kind of all there. I really liked your elevating the point about initiative and making something happen. And our accountability for doing that, and also accountability and moving forward. What does this mean? We don't get to go back. And really being intentional. And I think Passover is kind of a pause, like, wow, where will we be next year? Right. So, I really like making the Seder come alive in this way in terms of the pandemic, which is just so, that's where we all are. That's what happened.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Marcy, because I was having a lot of feelings about getting to Seder number 2 in the pandemic. And so I just kept thinking about that. And then I was like, oh, what text should I teach? And then I was like, actually, I think this is where we need to be. So thank you. Yeah, I think this is where we are. Anybody else want to talk about where they are and if they could map it onto the Seder or onto?
Yeah, can I comment?
Yeah, sure.
So first of all, I feel like I'm about to cross the Red Sea after a year of waiting on the shore.
Nice.
Because I get to hug Renee in about 2.5 weeks to come visit because I'm vaccinated. And I get to hug her sister next week. And I haven't seen them in well over a year. I wanted to build on what Marcy said also, and what you were saying, Renee. I looked up the Afikomen, and the traditional interpretation sometimes is about the 3 tribes of Israel, but there's another interpretation that says that the 3 matzahs represent thoughts, speech, and action. And the middle matzah of speech is the most important and the most difficult to do right. And it's the bridge between thinking and doing. Whoa. And so when you break the middle matzah and you hide the biggest part of the middle matzah, you are providing something for people to find in order to deal with speech in order to take action, which I thought was very, as you would call it, wooey.
Wait,
that was an interesting
say
thing.
that again. Wait, this is the part I didn't understand. Why is it the bigger one that's hidden? I didn't follow that.
Well, I interpret as being, that the most difficult, to make the transition from thought to action, you have to really take into account speech. And so speech in some ways is the most difficult, the transition phase. The other thing is the word afikomen, when I looked it up, there's no universal definition. It's usually related to the Greek word for dessert,
Right.
but there's another interpretation that it means Messiah. You probably know this.
I know
So,
it's the Greek word for dessert, but I didn't know it was Messiah.
yes,
But
well, it turns out it's also
saying that? When people look things up on Google, I want to know who's saying that.
Oh, I don't know. I'll send you the link. You know, it's
Because,
it's one of
people,
these,
Messiah and Jewish things on the web.
well, so Messianic age. So putting those together, in order to reach the Messianic age, we go and search for the speech in order to take action. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Nice. Did it say anything about why, if it's the 3 tribes, we split the Israelites?
No, it just said that they were the 3 tribes.
Hmm.
I think this was trying to be more progressive in coming up with the
Yeah.
alternative views.
Well, Karen has to figure out, well, maybe I should figure out, but if Karen figures out why we break the Israelites, maybe it's because the Israelites were broken by slavery. We can make up all sorts of things.
Well, I don't think we know necessarily that the middle matzah represents the Israelites, do we?
Oh, no, but I thought
just-
maybe that's the order you said. Or no, maybe not.
No, I just said that the 3
Oh, it's the
matzot,
3.
from
Okay.
what I understood, in the
Yeah.
past, is that they represent the 3 groups.
Yeah.
But I'd never have known which was which.
Yeah, so I just, okay.
But I'll try to delve into it a little deeper and fill
Okay.
you all in.
Does anyone have, okay, so Marcy's everywhere. I love that. Because I know, but I thought about it. I also thought about, like, it's not really just this order. Like, sometimes the matzah I wanted at the beginning, because when I also think of the matzah and the Passover story, I think, the story we're always told is that they were in such a rush that they didn't let it rise. And I think about that week in March. I remember, like, going and buying stuff, and maybe we aren't gonna, going to Costco, and I was like, well, I don't know, everyone's buying water. I don't buy bottled water, but maybe I need bottled water. So I bought jugs of water, and everybody's like in a rush. Like, what do we need to get? We're gonna stay at home. And that feels like the matzah, the like rushing and grabbing things. And
Mhm.
but matzah is not at the beginning of the order, but it's happening all at once. So does anyone else have any, want to share where they're at? Well, I hope that we can use, I hope this is a nice tool for whatever Seder or however you're planning on, celebrating this year, and using it as a reflective tool as we move into this season. And do people have Passover plans that they
Yeah, actually, I was going to make a request, Rabbi. I actually am able, because of being vaccinated, and I'm actually 2 weeks out of being vaccinated now. I have some friends who are also in the same situation, and so I'm feeling very lucky, and like I should be singing Hallel all the time, because I get to go this year. I'm going to two in-person Seders. They're both going to be very small, which is a new thing, and is related to the pandemic. But my request is, when you were teaching, I thought, oh my gosh, this is perfect. I want to take this to both Seders that I'm going to. So if I email you apart from, you'll send it. You could send it as an attachment.
Yeah, and I was just having a pause whether we should put it somewhere where everyone can find it, but I don't know if it's that well written, so we can put up like that. But maybe.
Well, it is actually very well written, and I think it should be made available publicly. But I didn't want to press it too much.
Maybe Paul. I'm just wondering if Paul, I was just debating. Are we sending?
We could put it. We're thinking about putting a link, to this recording on the website, and we could put a link to the text also.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Okay.
But you can email me also. But
okay.
I want to, and then when we do the recording, I should also say to people that Rabbi Steinberger and I from Hillel and some of the students are making a recorded Seder We do that for Capitol Lakes,
Mhm.
but it's going to be available for anyone. So we'll be putting that up and probably putting it up with an announcement. I can't remember. We have a whole email schedule. But anyways, that'll be put up so it could all, hopefully we'll have a little Passover section. So,
Okay.
You know, you asked where we were, and I have to say that in thinking about it, I think I was off on the other side of the Reed Sea dancing and singing. And then all of a sudden there were new versions of COVID. And then it was like, well, maybe I'm really back to the, before, just stepping in because, you know, are we reverting back to where we were when COVID first broke out? Is this just a little hump in the way? Maybe I'm being too optimistic too quickly. So
right.
it's like Marcy said, it kind of depends on what's going on in your life at that particular point in time and Newberry. And as far as your outline or your step-by-step, it's very good and it stimulates discussion and thought.
Yeah. You know, I also wonder, so once the Israelites cross the Red Sea, they sing at the shores, and then they're wandering for a long time, and there's a lot of complaining, and there's a lot of people, there's like, why can't we just go back?
Mhm.
And I keep wondering if there's going to be moments that we have where we're like, oh, I want to go back to the simple life of the pandemic. I mean, I know everyone didn't have that, but I wonder if there'll be moments where we want to go back to it, not back to the illness and the death. I'm not saying that, but the pieces of it that we'll look back on and think we're better. And so, you know, it's a complicated thing, as the Torah tells us, right? Like,
Right.
aren't the people supposed to just be happy? They're not slaves, but it's not that simple, right? My daughters are going back to school, and I keep thinking one of them is so excited, but I feel like, oh, is she going to get, you know, is the promised land really what the promised land doesn't look like? Doesn't look like it did before. And so, you know, is there going to be disappointment in what's on the other side? So,
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah,
They call it unknown for a reason.
that's right. And I just want to acknowledge in all of this, those people who have obviously have lost their lives or lost their loved one, over 500, you know, 500,000 people.
Absolutely.
And I read somewhere, but I don't remember the number now. Like if you expand that 500,000 people, over 500,000 people to their circles, the amount of grief is staggering. And that, like, you know, that we're in a place where we are privileged to have this conversation and think about these other things.
And that's just within the US.
That's just within the
We're not even, you know, the numbers, I haven't even heard the numbers worldwide. It just must be mind-boggling
right.
how many people have died.
Right. And so how many people, it's not just that they don't have a Seder table, they don't have they don't have those people at the Seder table.
Right,
So
right.
I just want to say that. It looks like Paul's there. Oh, Paul, we get to see Paul's face.
I don't know what I did with my screen.
Well, thank you all so much. And if you, you know, if you know of anyone who needs help getting, we're also helping people who maybe have trouble. There's Passover meals in a box to be ordered through Adama, and our staff's been helping people with that. We'll have the recording. So just keep that in mind.
Okay.
So will the recording, somebody that I'm going to deliver a Passover meal to, he'll be by himself. Will he be able to?
The recording of this Seder will be on the JSS website.
Okay.
Hopefully by, let's say by Wednesday. We're recording on Monday, so
Okay.
yeah. But certainly by the end of the week. I mean, certainly by Seder night. So yeah. Thanks for doing that, Dory.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, thank you so much, Renee, and
Thank
happy
you,
Pesach,
Marcy.
everyone.
Yes.
Yasher Koach, Rabbi.
Yeah, thank you.
Aksamat, everyone.
Chag Sameach, Rabbi, excellent job again this week.
Thank you.
I can't wait till next month.
Thank you.
It'll be after Passover and we'll see where we are on your
On our list,
like,
I know.
yeah.
Hopefully in a good place. Wisconsin's doing well in vaccinating. Dory, do you want to stay on for a minute? Right before I got on, I saw your email.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Oh, Paul, can you make me host so I can talk to Dory?
I think so.
Okay, cool.
Let's see here. Where are you? Okay, here you are.
Oh, is it just you, me, and Paul? We can tell Paul.
Yeah, I know I sent Paul a
Oh,
message.
you sent an email too.
It's hard for me to talk right now.
Yeah, but I'm so glad you're like just there. I had put on my list today to check on Harriet. It was sort of strange that I thought to do that before the end of the day. And
They called me. I mean, they bless their hearts. So she was moved to hospice, to a Grace.
Oh, she was.
Yeah. She, a couple of weeks ago, maybe she had fallen, and I guess she was in pain, and then they gave her morphine. And I think that no manner couldn't handle.
Yeah, the pain. Usually they transfer people for pain control.
She needed nursing. She needed more nursing care at that time. But I was there last Friday, and so and the morphine, she was itchy, and so she asked me if I would scratch her head. This is how sweet. So I'm scratching her head. She had itches, and I was scratching her head, and she said, "Oh, you're good at that. Oh, Toby must love that." I mean, so there she is. She just connected to, my experience adopting this sad little dog. And so that was Friday. Well, and they called me today.
Her kids.
Her daughter-in-law called me today and said she was at a Grace and she was dying now, and I should come right away. So I did, and I'm pretty sure she died within minutes of my leaving. But I got to, give her a kiss, and I just.
Yeah. And what a blessing that they called you. Yeah.
And so, yeah.
And were they there?
Yes. So Bob and Cindy.
Yeah.
And Cindy's daughter, I'm blanking on her name. Mandy was there. So the three of them were there. But David in Israel, he couldn't get out. And so he's got a flight for like 2 weeks. He just can't get here.
Oh, so he can't be here for the funeral.
Yeah. It's going to be just graveside. So I'm going to go.
Yeah, you should go.
And I think that Janice and
her husband are coming back.
Yeah, they will be here.
Yeah.
I think they're coming.
I was trying to think when I got your email, they were here. It was 2 weeks. It wasn't last weekend. It was the weekend
ago. Yeah.
Not that long ago, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think it was not last Friday, but the Friday before. Yeah.
I mean, I could tell when I was there today. I mean, I thought it would be minutes, and I left because I thought, okay, just give them that last second without, just them.
Yeah.
Well, I left, but
it's so sweet what you had with her.
I know. I mean, it just. So, my mother had a bunch of friends, and I don't know. We were always close, and I'm still close with one of them, but their friendships meant a lot to me. And so Harriet was a natural, but the thing is, I mean, we're of the same, I don't know, we're from the same place. I don't, I know she's from Milwaukee and I'm from New York, but yeah.
You're from the same soul place.
Yeah. I mean, and even, they told me today, Cindy told me today that, remembering the first time I met, because she wasn't assigned to me as a friendly visitor.
Oh.
I did a menorah to her, and we got to talking, and it was like magic. It was like, oh my God, we are meant to be.
Wow. And how many years ago?
7.
Wow.
And so Cindy told me that Harriet told her the same thing, told her right after meeting me, oh my God, I met this person. And of course, her son's a statistician, which holy, I mean, it's a miracle that, so, I mean, and I mean, we talked about stuff that maybe she didn't talk about with her kids. I mean, her upbringing and she always talked about it, that it wasn't good.
Yeah.
And Cindy said how her family didn't have any use for her, but oh my God, then Harriet's kids in that family, it was like such a blessing that, that they had her. I mean, how much she meant the perfect mother-in-law is what Cindy said.
Wow. Almost nobody says that, right?
I know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be that, but yeah. And anyway, it's hard for me to talk right now.
Yeah. Well, do you want to talk next week? Can I go? When's the funeral? You said Monday, Sunday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's going to be gravesite, so we can and it's Milwaukee. It's easy.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be nice out. Yeah. I've been doing graveside the whole time, and it feels really easy with COVID. I mean, not easy, but it doesn't feel complicated. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that Harriet arranged this 20 years ago. So,
that's what they told me. I asked Janice.
Yeah.
My mom's a planner. It's all.
Yeah. So I guess I will be friends with her family forever. So that's, but maybe we can talk after.
Yeah.
Sometime next week. And
yeah.
It's going to be, I mean, the Seder, so we're going to do it, me and Ron, just the two of us. And a lot of it, for me, it's about memory and making sure we remember. And we've got to remember all the people. We've got to remember this year. And
it's going to be hard to have a holiday right after this big loss. I mean, even if she's not part of that. And Fridays are going to be hard for you.
Fridays are going to suck. I think that's the last thing I said to the family when I left. I said, Fridays are just going to suck.
That's perfect.
But I'm going to, tomorrow, I'm going to pick up the Seder stuff for Don.
Oh, for Don, that's who you are. Oh.
Yeah, and then I'll bring it to him, and but I mean, he's, there's no other Jews there. He's gonna be, he's such a social person, and he doesn't strike me as being particularly religious, but people are connected to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I hope that he can maybe check in on the recording so that
right. You said you're going tomorrow, but you mean a week from Friday.
Yes, I do mean that.
Okay, just making sure.
Yes, tomorrow is just going to be a complete suck.
Yeah. Tomorrow you should do something nice for yourself. Or just lie in bed.
And that's good. Yeah. Pet Toby.
That's right. Scratch his head.
Scratch his head.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll talk next week, and I'll send an email to the family.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for being there.
Yeah. Very important that you're there. Yeah.
I just. I told when I first met Harriet, she had another friendly visitor. And she had a regular person, and Barb, who I think is back in town. And
what's her last name?
Barbara Temkin.
Oh,
So I told Louise, I said, well, I'm just going to be her friend, and I'm going to visit her. Anyway, so so Louise just said, well, just make it official. So okay. But yeah.
I had a friend who passed away from Alzheimer's about 5 years ago, and she had a nice family in town and one out of town. And we became good friends and felt like we were kind of soulmates too. We went out to lunch every Friday.
Oh,
She was my volunteer at the senior center. But she said the same thing that you said, even though she was saying it from her perspective, but I imagine Harriet was thinking the same thing, was that it's nice to have a friend, who is maybe of the generation of my kids, but not my kids.
Right.
I can say things to them that I don't want to say to my kids. I can have a relationship that I don't have with my kids, and we can be friends. And it's just a nice gift that you gave to Harriet.
And that she gave to me. I mean, we both had brother issues. It was incredible. So, yeah.
So me and my 80-year-old friend had relationship issues. She complained about her husband, and I complained about my girlfriend, and we had a good time.
Yeah, we talked about old boyfriends.
Yeah. So very happy that you were there for her.
Oh, just what a blessing. So, yeah, and that I now have her family to be friends with. So
yeah, and I'm so glad you're gonna go.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah, Ron, I asked Ron, he's, took a break from teaching for a second. I said, the funeral is on Sunday. He said, we're going. So, thank you.
All right. I'll call you next week.
Thank you.
And thanks, Paul, for being here.
Sure. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll look for that envelope. I'm sure it's there. I forgot to look. I was running.
That's in your mailbox at work. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, my mailbox at work. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.